All right, so we got a new Lattafa inspiration. This fragrance has been out, I want to say probably for at least a few months or so. And I mean, I've seen it, but I really didn't know what this fragrance was inspired by. So that's why I didn't really pick it up until I saw a video from Jensen's not too long ago where he was, kind of going over what this fragrance was inspired by. And so we're going to get into that in this video as well. So this is going to be Lattafa's Jasoor. All right. So Jasoor, this is Lattafa's inspiration of Valentino's Born in Roma Coral Fantasy. So this is one of my favorite, Valentino fragrances. I do have this one in the Born in Roma Intense as well. This is definitely, in my opinion, the more sort of, I guess you could say all year round, more sort of versatile wearing fragrance. I think you could, definitely wear this one in the daytime and at night. Whereas I feel like the Born in Roma Intense is definitely more sort of, it's more geared towards the nighttime, in my opinion. At least that's more so when I sort of reach for that fragrance. But this is pretty much, this scent profile is going to be like a really sort of, loud blast of, just lavender, vanilla, tobacco as well. Believe there's also some patchouli in this as well. It's just a really nice masculine fragrance that has, sort of like that Born in Roma kind of sweet undertone, sort of profile to it. All right. Now, when it comes to Jasoor, this is going to be the presentation for Jasoor. So on the front of the box here, you have Jasoor, and then you have the Lattafa logo and Jasoor down here at the bottom. You have the Lattafa logo up top. And then like all around like the top part of the box, you have like all of these like different random words written here. Got the authenticity sticker here on this side, and then on the back, you got like the ingredients, Lattafa, and then the bottle size. This is 100 ml. And then at the bottom, you have the QR code, the barcode, stuff like that. There's also a production date on here. You can only see it when you place this in, like certain light. It looks like this one was actually produced back in April of this year. So like I said, this has been out for quite some time. I remember seeing this on BanaderFragrance.com, which I believe that's where I actually bought this fragrance from. But I just didn't pick it up because, again, I didn't know what this fragrance was inspired by. And I mean, when it comes to buying these fragrances, I only will buy these fragrances if I know exactly what the fragrance is inspired by. I don't necessarily just go and just buy random Lattafa or Fragrance World fragrances if I don't know what they're actually inspired by. So had I known that this was inspired by, Born in Roma Coral Fantasy, when I first saw it, I would have picked this one up for sure. All right. Because I would have been curious to know, okay, how close is this gonna come to the original fragrance? All right. So this is gonna be the bottle. As you can see here, just like the front of the box, on the top here, this is basically the cap. You have all those different random words written all around it. Then you have Jasoor down here and Lattafa. You got the Lattafa logo on the top of the cap. And then there's nothing like on the bottom of the bottle here, or nothing on the back of the bottle, I'm sorry, but on the bottom you have the Lattafa sticker. And this is the bottle, all right? So I do like the presentation of this. I think for some people it kind of comes off as a little weird, especially with all of these different words going around it, but I do actually like it. And then in terms of the sprayer, the sprayer is it's average in my opinion. All right. Now, if you are not familiar with the notes of Coral Fantasy, the notes in the top notes for Coral Fantasy are going to be red apple, cardamom, and Calabrian bergamot. In the mid, you have lavender, bourbon geranium, and clary sage. And then in the base notes, you have tobacco leaf, patchouli, and Haitian vetiver. Now, the Lattafa Jasoor notes, those are going to be slightly different. For Lattafa Jasoor, you have cardamom, apple, not red apple, but just apple, bergamot. And then in the mid, you have lavender, tobacco, and geranium. And then in the base, you have tonka bean, leather, patchouli, and vetiver. So for the most part, about the same, but definitely some, sort of differences that you get between the two. Now, in terms of the smell of the two fragrances, there are, I would say, some very sort of slight differences. But in my opinion, like overall, this is like very, very close to the Valentino. So I have the Valentino on this strip here, and then I've got the Lattafa on this one. Now, just in the opening, you do definitely get that sort of difference between, the sort of apple note that they're using. So like the red apple in the Valentino, definitely it comes off as being slightly more sort of sweeter, in my opinion. So like think about the difference between, let's say, something like a Fuji apple or Fuji apple, something like that, or a Gala apple, as compared to something like a Granny Smith apple. So the Granny Smith apple is going to be a little bit less sweet, a little bit more sort of like on the milder end and sort of, like the sweetness. Whereas the Fuji apple is definitely going to have more of sort of like a richer, sweeter sort of taste to it. And that's what I get with, the differences between the Valentino and the Lattafa. So the apple note, to me, in the Valentino, it gives it a slightly sort of sweeter edge. Whereas in my opinion, the way that the Lattafa comes off in the opening, the apple blends more into the cardamom and the bergamot in the Lattafa. So it kind of comes off as slightly fresher, in my opinion, in the Lattafa in the immediate opening. Now, I mean, how much different is it? It's like very negligible. It's not really like a huge difference, in my opinion. And I mean, really, this difference, I would say you really only notice this if you spray the two side by side. I think even if you're someone who probably wears Valentino Born in Roma Coral Fantasy, pretty regularly, I think that if you were to spray the Jasoor on, you wouldn't immediately be like, oh yeah, that's different. I don't necessarily think so. I think the difference between the two fragrances would be something that you would have to smell the two fragrances side by side to really be able to know, like, okay, there are some sort of slight differences. But yeah, I mean, definitely, in my opinion, the Valentino doesn't lean into the cardamom as much. And there's definitely more of an emphasis on the apple in the opening, whereas the Lattafa does lean into the cardamom a little bit more, so it gives it a slightly more kind of fresh, spicy, sort of aromatic feel to the fragrance. But again, the difference is pretty. It's a pretty small difference, in my opinion. Now, the other difference that I noticed between Jasoor and the Valentino were, in my opinion, Jasoor, once the fragrance starts to dry down, Jasoor does, in my opinion, come off as being a little bit more denser and slightly sweeter than what the Valentino does. So in the dry down, to me, Born in Roma Coral Fantasy This comes off as being a little bit more sort of aromatic, and more sort of airy. Whereas I feel like the Lattafa definitely comes off as being denser and a little bit more heavier wearing. Again, not like a huge difference between the two, but I definitely I did notice that for sure. So I think maybe for someone who does regularly wear this fragrance, that would probably be where they would be able to notice the difference without necessarily having to, smell the two fragrances side by side. Would be, kind of in the dry down. This one is definitely, it's going to be, in my opinion, a little bit more sort of diffusive, again, more sort of aromatic, whereas this is definitely going to come off as a slightly sweeter and denser fragrance. All right. Now, I would say in terms of whether or not that's something that people will like, it all just kind of depends on the person. In my opinion, it wasn't really that big of a deal for me, or that big of a difference really, but it was something that was slightly noticeable. Now, in terms of the performance between the two fragrances, in my opinion, the performance on both of these are going to be about the same. Now, with this one being slightly denser than the Valentino, this is going to come off as being, slightly stronger than what the Born Aroma Coral Fantasy will. But I mean, in my opinion, overall, they do have about the same strength. This one just kind of goes about it in more of sort of like an airier way. But in terms of like the projection, these are about the same. They are going to push out pretty loudly, definitely, 3 to 4 feet or so. And in terms of the longevity on these are easily, at least on my skin, they're easily going to be over 10 hours. So, I mean, really, I would say what I probably should do, I probably should just actually sell this fragrance and just keep this one. For this 100 ml, I was able to get this one for, I want to say like around $100 or so. And that was from like a discounter. I believe retail, this one probably goes for, in this 100 ml size anyway, probably like 150 plus. Whereas this one, 400 ml, this one I picked up from Banner Fragrance for like $29.99, I believe is what it cost. So this does not smell, like way more better than what this one does. I can definitely say that for sure. This fragrance, even though it does smell slightly different than what, the Jasoor does, again, this is going to come off as a little bit more aromatic. There's not really, I would say, a quality difference that I could really speak of between the two fragrances. So that's definitely where this one is right on par with the Valentino. I just think that the way that this fragrance is interpreted, it does, sort of interpret the scent profile slightly differently. But overall, it's extremely close to Born Aroma Coral Fantasy. So if I'm going to give this one a closeness rating on a scale from 1 to 10, I would say that this is easily about a 92.5 to about 95% close to Born Aroma Coral Fantasy. So still extremely close to the original from Valentino. And then if I'm going to give this one the overall rating on a scale from 1 to 10, this is easily a 9 out of 10. So I would recommend this to somebody who maybe, let's say for instance, if the Coral Fantasy is like your signature scent, but you don't necessarily love the price of this fragrance, especially if you're a person who buys it, retail, then I would definitely say that this might be a fragrance that you could kind of, preserve your original bottle of and still get, for the most part, the same experience. I would also say that if you're somebody who really wants to get this scent profile, the Born Aroma Coral Fantasy, but you don't have the money even to buy this from like a discounter, So let's say you don't have $100 to spend on a fragrance, then you absolutely won't be missing out on anything, in my opinion, if you pick this one up. All right. This is going to give you, for the most part, the exact same experience that you're going to get with the Valentino. All right. So I recommend this. Like I said, I probably should just go ahead and sell this fragrance and keep this one, because this one definitely, it comes that close to the original, to where it's kind of like, I don't need to have both of these. So I mean, one of these needs to go, but I think it would probably be smarter for me to just get rid of this one and keep this one. All right. So that's my take on Jasoor. Let me know in the comments what you all think about this fragrance. Do you all love this fragrance? Do you hate it? Do you agree with my assessment of how close this actually comes to the original fragrance? And if not, let me know in the comments as well. Also, if you're brand new to the channel, do me a favor, go ahead and subscribe. And again, that's Jamar from Vegas Sense. I'll see you on the next video.